This is Damon Fordham, local author and historian, and I'm here to tell you a very little known story from American history involving two great early figures, Benjamin Banneker and Thomas Jefferson. Now, most everyone knows that Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States and also one of the main authors of the Declaration of Independence, as well as one of the main people behind the Constitution of the United States. And there's also the great African-American scientist Benjamin Banneker, who was born in Maryland in the 1700s, and he was a free man who became the first major black American scientist. He invented the first clock in the New World, and he was also the creator of an almanac, which recorded the weather as well as was filled with wise sayings and such. Now, there is some story in one of these ridiculous, phony documentaries that are floating around these days that Big Ben in London was named after him, and of course that's a bunch of nonsense. However, he did, as a matter of fact, serve as one of the main people who designed the layouts for the city we know as Washington, D.C. in 1791. Now, but there's a little known story between him and Thomas Jefferson that needs to be told. Now, Thomas Jefferson, as I mentioned before, he was the third president of the United States, and he was also pretty much a Renaissance man of his time. And in the early late 1700s, he wrote a book called Notes on the State of Virginia. This was about 1783 or so. And in the Notes of the State of Virginia, he had to say this, among other things. He talked about the land and the people of the state of Virginia, and about blacks, he said this: the first difference that strikes us is that of color. Whether the black of the Negro resides in the reticular membrane between the skin and scarf skin, or in the scarf skin itself, whether it proceeds from the color of the blood, the color of the bile, or from that of some other secretion, the difference is fixed in nature and is real to us as its seat and cause were better known to us. Gee, that's nice, Tommy. And he goes on to say this. Listen to this now. Are not the fine mixtures of red and white, the expressions of every passion by greater or less suffusions of color in the one, preferable to the eternal monotony which reigns in the countenances and that immovable veil of black which covers all the emotions of the other race? Add to these flowing hair, a more elegant symmetry of form, their own judgment in favor of the whites, declared by their preference for them as uniformly as the preference of the orangutan for the black women of that of his own species. Are you serious, Tommy? It gets even worse. They have, besides those of color, figure, and hair, there are other physical distinctions proving a difference of race. They have less fair hair on the face and body. They secrete less by the kidneys and more by the glands of the skin, which gives them a very strong and disagreeable odor. Really. This is Thomas Jefferson, right? Now, Benjamin Banneker, by the late 1700s, was a very accomplished scientist, and he happened to read this. So, a couple of years later, he decided to write a reply to Thomas Jefferson's statements. And here, in part, is what he had to say. Dear Sir, I am fully sensible of the greatness of that freedom which I take with you on the present occasion, a liberty which seemed to me scarcely allowable when I reflected on the distinguished and dignified station in which you stand, and the almost general prejudice and prepossession which is so prevalent in this world against those of my complexion. I suppose it is a truth too well attested to you to need proof here that we are a race of beings who have long labored under the abuse and censure of the world. Whoa. That we have long been looked upon with an eye of contempt, and that we have long been considered rather as brutish than human, and scarcely capable of mental endowments. Note the vocabulary here. Sir, I will hope to safely admit, in a consequence of that report which has reached me, that you are a man far less inflexible in sentiments of this nature than many others, that you are measurably friendly and well disposed toward us, and you are willing and ready to lend your aid and assistance to our relief from these many distresses and numerous calamities to which we are reduced. Now, sir, if this is founded in truth, I apprehend that you will embrace every opportunity to eradicate that train of absurd and false ideas and opinions which so generally prevails in respect to us, and that your sentiments are concurrent with mine, which are that the universal Father hath given being to us all, and that he hath not only made all of us but one flesh, but that he hath also, without partiality, afforded all of us the same sensations, and endowed all of us with the same faculties, and however variable we may be in society or religion, however diversified in situation or color, we are all the same family and stand the same in relation to him. Well, go ahead, Benjamin. And he goes on to say, I suppose that your knowledge of my brethren is too extensive a need to recital here. Neither shall I presume to prescribe methods in which they may be relieved, otherwise than by recommending to you and all others to wean yourselves from these narrow prejudices which you have imbibed with respect to them. And as Job proposed to his friends, put your souls in their souls instead, that shall your hearts be enlarged in kindness and benevolence toward them, and thus shall you need neither direction of myself or others in which manner to proceed herein. And now, sir, although my sympathy and affection for my brethren has caused my enlargement thus far, I ardently hope that your candor and your generosity will plead with you on my behalf when I make known to you that it was not originally my design, but having taken up my pen in order to direct to you, as a present, a copy of my almanac, which I have calculated for the succeeding year, I was unexpectedly and unavoidably led thereto. And so he goes on to talk about the almanac and what it concluded. And he goes on to say, and now, sir, I must conclude and subscribe myself with the most profound respect, your most obedient humble servant, Benjamin Bannker. So he's basically sending him his almanac to show that all of this nonsense that he believes about black people is just that, nonsense. Well, Thomas Jefferson got this letter, as well as Benjamin Banneker's almanac. How did he reply? Let's listen. To Mr. Benjamin Banneker, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, August 30th, 1791. Dear Sir, sir, in those days, I thank you sincerely for your letter of August the 19th, and for the almanac that is contained. Nobody wishes more than I do to see such proofs, such as you exhibit, that nature has given to our black brethren talents equal to those of other colors of men, and that the appearance of the want of them is owing merely to the degraded condition of their existence, both here in Africa and in America. I can add with truth that nobody wishes more ardently to see a good system commence for raising the condition, both of their body and mind, to what it ought to be, and for the imbecility of their present existence and other circumstances which cannot be neglected, I will admit. Get this. I have taken the liberty of sending your almanac to Monsieur de Condizet, Secretary of the Academy of Science in Paris and member of the Philanthropic Society, because I consider it a document to which your whole color had a right to their justification against the doubts which have been entertained against them. I am with great esteem, sir, your most humble and obedient servant, Thomas Jefferson. You see, and this is one of the things that led to Benjamin Banneker, in fact, being part of the committee that drew up the plans for Washington, D.C. But the fact of the matter is, the lesson to this is important, is that Benjamin Banneker saw what was said by the great Thomas Jefferson against black people. And instead of resorting to insults and all of that, he used his articulation and his skills to prove otherwise. And that's one of the things that led him to become one of the designers of Washington, D.C. So the moral to this story is, ladies and gentlemen, that the greatest weapon that you can have is in your head, not in your hands. To learn more about it, read The African American Experience by Kai Wright. This is Damon Fordham.